All right, we're back and welcoming Dr. Tony Jimenez to the show. Also, if you see on my podcast set, Tony, I wish you were sitting here with me. I've got Nick Gonzalez. He's every day on the set with his book, What Went Wrong, which is up there on the shelf. We got Trophoblasts and the Origins of Cancer that he wrote with my other friend, Linda Isaacs, he worked with at the time. Nutrition, One Man Alone, and of course, Conquering Cancer, Volume 1, 2, etc. And Dr. Tony Jimenez, it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since Dr. Nick is with us and left.
Well, thank you, RSB, for this opportunity to talk about our dear friend Nick Gonzalez. I'm here at our Cancun Treatment Center, and interestingly enough, we opened this center in 2015, the year that Nick passed away. Our Tijuana Center opened in the year 2000, so that was 25 years ago. But as we reminisce, as we talk about Nick, I'm at a place that we opened in 2015. Maybe that was indirectly something associated with Nick. And I have here the certificate of completion. And this is the training that we did for a year plus. It was an educational training to promote and to keep that legacy going of the Gonzalez protocol. And this was the Gonzalez Guardian, October 6, 2021, signed by Mary Beth Gonzalez, as she's worked so hard, as you know, RSB, in continuing the brilliant work of that mind that was Dr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, I was thinking, Dr. Tony, you've been at this for a long time as well as a physician, helping people in ways that are, they call it unconventional. Like, you actually get results. You help people to heal. And Dr. Nick dedicated his life to that. And I imagine you might have a story or two from encountering Dr. Nick Gonzalez when he was alive and how he impacted you to, with a desire, because you had already known a lot. You've done a lot. It's like, well, you decided I need to also learn what Dr. Nick knows and make sure that carries on as well. This proud and powerful healing tradition that was truly honoring that concept of first do no harm. When we talk about oncology, most of the time it's, destroying the body back to health if they can survive the treatment and the onslaught. And I recognize there may be a place for those things in limited circumstance, but Dr. Nick was so profound in his knowledge of nutrition and body typology and enzymes, other things that he had brought out as well. And I'm curious to hear some of the encounters you had with him early on, because you didn't start from zero.
Yeah, the encounter, I want to start, RSB, with a patient encounter, because this gives everyone from the get-go the knowledge of the power of the Gonzalez protocol. So as I mentioned, I was certified along with 6 other doctors in October 2021. And then December, just 2 months later, we receive a patient here in Cancun with stage 4 pancreatic cancer from Lubbock, Texas. And in Texas, they told him absolutely no possibilities of helping him, maybe 2 to 4 weeks of survival. So the patient comes here to Cancun, and the 3rd day, we had to hospitalize him with acute pancreatitis, a very life-threatening situation. And I didn't know, my doctors didn't know if Rick is his name, if he could be discharged, if he will make it out of the hospital alive. Thankfully, after 10 days, he is discharged. Still in a very precarious situation with a very poor prognosis at short term. And I'm thinking to myself, what should we do? If he stays here at Hope for Cancer for 3 weeks, which is typically what patients do in their initial visit to Hope for Cancer, will he even make it those 3 weeks? So I talked to him and his wife, and I said, what if we put you on the Gonzalez protocol? Why? Because you could do this at home. You'll stay here 3 more days. I'll teach you the diet, the enzyme, the supplements, the detox, all that. And you could do this at home. I was just thinking, well, if he passes, at least he's at home and not here, away from home. So I sent Rick home with the Gonzalez protocol that I was just recently certified in. And to make a longer story shorter, Rick excelled. He was committed, he was disciplined, as was his wife and his team, in the diet, the supplements, which there are a lot of, as you know, and the detox. And to the point where 3 months later, Rick was mountain biking again. He would text me and send me pictures, and I'm like, wow, blown away. Because the educational training that we had for a month plus with tests and all this was, was intense. But then to actually see it with the first patient that I put on the full Gonzalez protocol, and Rick is thriving 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year later, Rick is still fine. And at this point, Rick decided to change his diet on his own.
Hmm.
He started eating pork. He got a little bit, tired of the protocol. And sad to say that Dick chose his path in life. And a few months after he stopped the Gonzalez protocol, he passed away. But imagine this, 2 to 4 weeks to live with the best of the best that he had gotten in Lubbock, Texas, then comes to me, has acute pancreatitis, just barely makes it out of the hospital, and he's back mountain biking, doing the things he loved, and for a year. And then
Yes.
that's when he decided. So this is the power of this protocol.
Well, and you bring up a lot of things that make it a challenge for anybody such as yourself and Dr. Nick, who really had committed their lives to help people that were in need. But the recognition that they were an active participant in their own recovery,
Yes.
which is a bit different than what we call traditional oncology now, where it come and maybe there's a last minute Hail Mary rescue with a toxic medicine or radiation or surgery. They don't ask you to do anything. In fact, they'll feed you things that will feed cancer. It's so absurd, their lack of knowledge of nutrition. And I've been pointing this out, like in Texas and Louisiana with this MAHA movement. It's like everybody's celebrating that those two states are now mandating nutrition, CMEs, ongoing education as physicians to keep their license. But when you find out how much nutrition they get, you're going to laugh, sadly. 1 hour every 4 years.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, in med school, what did I learn about nutrition? Don't give salt to the patients with hypertension. Give diet to those that are constipated, and watch the sugar in the diabetics. And that was about it. However, nutrition, if you look at the American Cancer Society website, they talk about nutrition to help you tolerate the chemotherapy and radiation, not nutrition as a medicine in itself, because we all know from Hippocrates, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And so this was a big component of, and is a big component of the Gonzalez protocol is nutrition. And here we personalize, individualize the nutrition based on the patient's what is called metabolic typing. And I want to make one other note on the introduction and the initial information that you brilliantly gave to your viewers, RSB, is about heavy metals, because this plays a role in cancer. And to your point, 99% of our patients have heavy metal toxicity. I could probably say 100, but maybe people won't believe me if I say 100, so I'm saying 99%. And for sure, aluminum is on the 100%, 100% of patients. And even those that come to a wellness program have aluminum toxicity, cadmium, mercury, and the list just goes on and on. So the detox, which is one of the 3 pillars in the Gonzalez protocol, is there for a very important reason. And more than ever in the history of the world, now in 2025, I say we need to live a life of detox. Detox, detox, detox. And the diet, of course, we mentioned, so important. But my history, RSB, with Dr. Gonzalez goes back to the early 1990s. I know you don't believe that I'm that old, but yes, it does go
I
back
like
to
to
the
say the
early
same thing
1990s.
about myself, Tony. I'm like,
Right?
we're the elder statesmen now. It's embarrassing or not, because you look great and you're doing great. I'm doing my best to do better than I did when I was a young kid, having to go through chronic diseases first and then meeting, people who would become my heroes and friends, including Dr. Nick. But yeah, to know that you go back that far is astonishing. So go back to that time frame, because most people were not aware of a fraction of the things we're talking about today.
That's right. And I was a young doctor at this time, and there was an organization called the Cancer Control Society that will meet every year, either in LA and then it was in Pasadena, California. And that's when I first met Dr. Nick in one of the Cancer Control Society conventions, which was brilliant. There were like 1,500 at that time attendees, doctors, the general public, scientists. And Nick stood out to me because of his brilliant mind that you obviously know of. And sometimes I had to like put like slow motion in my brain to stay with him, right? Because he
Yes.
talked like 1,000 miles an hour, 1,000 words a minute, if not more. But you could see the brilliance. But beyond that, because science is good, research is good, but his charisma, his love, his passion for the patient, his passion for the work, his passion for humanity, his passion to continue to thrive like we all do. I like that being the change because he was an example of being the change and always learning from the patients, which is who we learn the most from, don't
Yes.
we? RSB from the
Yes.
patients. So if you were to ask me what I learned the most from Dr. Nick was that his passion, his love for patients, his love for humanity, his unwavering spirit to always get better. And that's the story because he heard
Mhm.
of the enzyme program, as you know, from Dr. Kelly.
Mhm.
And
Got his books here.
went to Grapevine, Texas, in those years. Dr. Kelly was an orthodontics who was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He was starting to take enzymes to, improve his digestion, and he started to feel better. Dr. Kelly did started to feel better and better. And then he said, "Well, what if I add some supplements, some vitamins, some amino acids, some proteins, and change my nutrition?" And Dr. Kelly was cured where there was no hope given to him by the doctors in Dallas in those years.
Mm.
And then at this time, Dr. Gonzalez, as a brilliant mind, that journalist background that he had, right, Ivy League graduate, he heard of Dr. Kelly, and he went to see him and learn from him, and then that became the Gonzalez enzyme program as an MD, which Dr. Kelly was a dentist. Dr. Gonzalez was able to fine tune, to improve on the work of Dr. Kelly, the dentist.
Mhm.
So the rest is history, treating hundreds. You have some books there. You didn't mention this one, though, and maybe you do have it there, the Maverick
Yes.
MD, right? Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez and his fight for a new cancer treatment. And this is another way to describe him as a maverick for all the things he went through, the challenges, but persisted. He was what? Not too far away from Memorial Sloan Kettering
Yeah.
there in New York, right?
Well, and it
Brilliant.
reminds me, one of our first meetings, because I had, read what I could find of his works at the time in the 90s. I hadn't met him yet. And I think it was the early 2000s, very early on, that we had met at a conference finally in New York on alternative integrative medicine. And at that time, there was a study being conducted by the NIH, NIAID. Fauci was, that Fauci guy overseeing all of that. And, this was to prove, so to speak, that, the enzyme therapy that he was working with could actually help people with serious cancers, with pancreatic cancers. And I had been broadcasting already for some time and connected with many investigative journalists in this field where we were not afraid to ask questions that were tough and challenge things like, hey, does big pharma own and control our government, for instance? Why is there not genuine curiosity, investigation, innovation in the field of cancer therapies and treatments? And, we recognize the war on cancer that Nixon declared in the early 70s, and more people are dying from cancer than ever before, even with, many decades of billions of dollars thrown that way. And so at the time I met with him, I got word that the HivNet trials in Uganda that were going on related to HIV transmission mother to child in Uganda, they were doing this study with this nevirapine, which is such a toxic drug. It killed the patients in the trial, the mothers and the babies. And it was just like a criminal act of murder. And rather than holding those people that conducted that NIH trial in Uganda at the time to account, they were transferred to oversee Nick Gonzalez's study at NIH. And I warned him about that. And I told him they're going to sabotage your study. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure that the results are not good. And, he wasn't aware of it at the time, but he wrote about it in one of his books as well. And I only say that because the journey that he was on was so pure, so good, and so godly that I don't know if he considered at that time until we met specific on that particular issue that they would do something like that to make sure that the information wouldn't come out. And this is something you've witnessed as a physician who has stepped outside of the proverbial box, right? As our friend Ty Bollinger has talked about, cancer step outside the box as well, that we would be a threat to a very profitable form of medicine that would exclude things like nutrition, innovation, enzymes, body typology, constitutional typology, acknowledgement, and all of that. And, as I got to know Nick even more, we became great friends, and we would talk on and off the air. And he's probably the most favorite guest of everybody in the history of the Robert Scott Bell Show. People that have been with me that long, couldn't wait, just loved our discussion. We didn't even have to talk about medicine, Tony. We didn't have to talk about cancer. We could talk about anything. That's the kind of guy you would be engaged, enriched, enthralled. You'd be laughing. You'd be outraged, all of that. And we would do that. And I was most impressed, among many things that are impressed me about Nick, was that, here I was, a homeopath, not a medical doctor. I'm a guy really outside the box who, yes, was raised in medical pharmaceutical families. I knew a lot. I studied a lot. But at the same time, it's like, you didn't have to listen to a word I said. But he was always engaged and interested. Hey, what do you think about this? Or I might come to him with something, oh, man, that's interesting. Tell me more. And just like you pointed out how we can learn from people we help, Nick was always open to learning from people that didn't have an official degree, as I call it sometimes, a medical degree. He would laugh, but he knew what that was. And it was the point that you would set aside the ego, which if anybody had a right to, as smart as he was, to just like lord it over anybody and everybody, including other doctors, never did I see him do it. I mean, he would get disgusted with people like Fauci when he learned of how they operated, and that wasn't cool because those are not nice people. But it wasn't from an ego perspective, I have to say. These are other things I want to share as we're talking that are brought to my mind and my experience as I reminisce, and I still can't believe it's been 10 years. And shout out to Mary Beth Gonzalez. I know, Mary Beth, you're in the audience, and you've helped me coordinate all of these interviews, and I'm glad that, Dr. Tony, you get to kick it off this week with us today.
Yeah, brilliant. And you mentioned one thing that all your listeners are wanting to hear. Well, what about results? What about outcomes? And you mentioned that. And Nick leaves us behind a few volumes that we have here. This one is 50 pancreatic and breast cancer patients of the Gonzalez Nutritional Protocol. This is volume 1. There's volume 2 with 62 patients on the Gonzalez protocol. So it's like when I was speaking in Western Samoa, talking to the medical students, the professors, all the ministers. At the end, one guy said, he asked me 2 questions. He was a doctor from Australia, and he said, Dr. Tony, how were you able to gather not only the prime minister, but all the ministers of the island in your talk here? And I said, it wasn't me. It was the Lord. It was God. And that was behind everything that Nick did. Right. And in his protocol that we were certified in, there's scriptures that we give the patients. Right. And the second thing this doctor asked me from Australia is, where are your placebo, double blind crossover studies? And I said, they're in the results. Patients don't come to us for us to give them a sugar pill. Right. And so this is what we have from Nick. We have hard data here and patient reports that were healed and cured from the incurables, as they're
There,
sometimes
and
are
by the way,
called.
Tony,
And the other
that
thing
there's the
is that,
book up there in the
yeah,
bookshelf every day on the air. When I have a guest, you can see it. What went wrong? He wrote about
okay,
that,
yeah.
sabotage. So when people ask you or challenge you, well, where are the double blind? Dude, do you understand how much money and power is at stake if they were actually to acknowledge it in the peer-reviewed medical literature, even as some literature confirms these things. And I point out in my lectures, we were together at the Beljanski Integrative Cancer Conference, speaking about success stories, whether it be from the peer-reviewed literature or the clinical results, as you point out. And, when we talk about healing, it either happens or it doesn't. An N of one, an anecdote, somebody was on death's door that you brought up with pancreatic cancer, pancreatitis, and he lives until he strays from the protocol, from the diet. We're going to feature probably some patients of Nick's that are still alive 20 or more years later, 25 or more years later, including Carol Alt, who's scheduled, I believe, maybe tomorrow or next week. I'm not sure. I don't even know. I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, in fact. So there are real living examples of this that when they ask for, I demand the double blind placebo, I'm like, you guys are so far in the box. I don't know how you're helping your patients at all if that's all you're concerned about.
Absolutely, and something that's happening now, indirectly related to what you're talking about, RSB, is that I just came back from China. I was there for 2 weeks visiting hospitals, colleagues, and TCM centers, and a big photodynamic association congress. But in China, they're now reversing type 1 and type 2 diabetes with autologous engineered stem cells. But guess what? Due to geopolitical issues and pharmaceutical industry, the world is trying to keep that within China and not to come out of China, because that's I don't know, $1 trillion industry in diabetes, is not only treating diabetes, but the complications, the surgeries, all the hospital and doctor's visits to treat diabetes. So these are tough things that, and we have a lot of patients that come to Hope for Cancer that are either in the pharmaceutical industry. We had a patient from Pfizer that quit because it was time. She said, ethically, I cannot continue to do this. And example over example, I just saw a patient before coming on with the RSB, and they're from Orlando, Florida. And he said, Dr. Tony, why can't we do this in the US? Why can't we do this in the US? So let's be the change, continue to be the change. And it's in God's hands, but we're expecting big changes to happen in the next
Well,
few
and it
years.
doesn't happen without God. That's the thing, and I'm so glad
That's
you
right.
brought that up about Dr. Nick. We did a at least one show only about God and the Bible and spiritual stuff, and people loved it. Like we didn't even talk about cancer stuff. That was Nick, his ability to draw people into the conversation, engage, and we would always find things to laugh about as well. And we could talk politics too, and these were the great joys I had. And it didn't matter what we were going to cover; it was going to be amazing. But you're right. The spirit was the essence of it. This is why, as I've identified my own experience, plus, meeting people like Nick and yourself are spirit driven, that our role ultimately, as doctors or teachers or healers is to remind people of the source of all healing, which is their divinity, their connection to the divine. And from there, all else flows. And then you begin to question this idea of poison people for profit and wonder, is really that the best we can do? Is it? And you point out things that are happening in communist China, of all places, yet there's some innovations occurring, and the free market capitalists, that they're not outside of China, don't want that to get out because it'll curtail their gravy train of toxic, ionizing radiation treatments and or toxic poison treatments derived, whether they be from World War I mustard gases or even surgical interventions, which arguably can be life-saving in certain circumstances, but even the procedures for pancreatic cancer devastate quality of life and don't necessarily extend it all that much in many cases. And Dr. Nick was able to help people without all three of those things in most every case.
Yes, and all the mentors that I've had through my life, I actually met one in China, in Guangzhou, China, when I was there, a 5-star general oncologist who I've studied his work since many, many years ago, maybe starting in 2000. And I got to have dinner with this doctor and the changes, the innovations. However, now, as we know, RSB, the incidence of cancer is increasing. Younger patients with cancer, patients that were in remission, coming out of remissions, the so-called turbo cancers. We're seeing it every day, not only here at Hope for Cancer, but throughout the world. And for that, learning from my mentors, including Dr. Nick and others, I came out with my second book that I want to mention it because it's called Cancer Outsmarted, 11 Integrative Hallmarks of Cancer to Minimize Risk and Optimize Health. Minimize risk and optimize health. So these 11 integrative hallmarks are described here very carefully and practical things that we, all of us, need to start doing now. And in here are some of Nick's principles, including nutrition, including detoxification, and the spiritual emotional components. So I talk about the 11 integrative hallmarks into four main categories, and it's too much to go into it, but I highly recommend. I co-author this book with my scientists. I think you met Dr. Shibuta Chakravarti. His story was that he was a top-line scientist. He's a medicinal and computational chemist. He was helping develop chemotherapeutic agents. At some point, Nick realized that the standard of care was not where health and wellness was and recovering from cancer. And so did I and my co-author, Dr. Chakravarti, working in the pharmaceutical industry and then transferring to Hope for Cancer. And now Dr. Chakravarti has been with me for 20 plus years and working together to promote wellness, to promote health, and not to have that fear that you mentioned. We know, right, RSB, that fear is a low vibratory state. And this is why they're promoting this, because then cancer cells are communication pathways. Cancer cells are very smart, they're intelligent cells, and they take advantage. Cancer, I believe, is an opportunistic disease. And what we're doing with the Gonzalez protocol, with the Hope for Cancer treatments, is affecting the tumor microenvironment at many levels, starting with the spiritual, the mental, emotional, and of course the
well,
physical.
fear is an immunosuppressant, and the word cancer, the big C they call it. That's why people know it that way. It strikes fear in the hearts of so many. And part of our journey and Dr. Nick's journey is to alleviate much of that fear, to recognize that you can live and you can live a long time even after getting the C word diagnosis. And many of his, friends and patients still around, even, I remember doing a show with Suzanne Summers and Dr. Nick, and, Suzanne lived decades longer than she was predicted by allopathic medicine with his help as well. And she credited, and so many did. This is, a story that will never be finished telling. And by the way, I think I see Dr. Nick. Oh yeah, here is proof of concept is right here. So he's always on screen with me, as you know. I know he is here in spirit, but Dr. Nick is always part of the Robert Scott Bell Show, even though he's not here in the physical body. And I miss him every day too. When I think about all the wondrous times we've had together, and I know anybody that he's touched their lives, they all miss him as well. But also, I salute you, Dr. Tony, and of course, Mary Beth and other Gonzalez Guardians and other doctors that might not be official Gonzalez Guardians that have learned much and have applied at least a little bit, if not a lot, of what Dr. Nick was here to teach us. And that, we really can. We talk about the various things like conquer cancer, beat cancer, all of that stuff. The fact is, we were already doing it. Dr. Nick was already doing it. And you are doing it, Tony, right now. I just wish people would find you first instead of last. You know what I'm saying? Oftentimes they would come to Dr. Nick and others like you as a last resort. And I'm saying, go ahead.
No, I want to say that thankfully, years ago, it was 85% to 90% of our patients were stage 4. They failed all conventional therapy, and that's when they came to us at Hope for Cancer. Now, thankfully, RSB, that's changed a bit. That's about 70%. From 85, 90, it's 70%. So one of the good things that has happened in the last number of years is that there's more awareness, right? There's more awareness. People are asking the question, why? And they are challenging their doctors. And so this is beautiful. And I like that you say that Dr. Nick is on all of your shows, because Mary Beth sent me a text message before we started today. And she said, thanks for doing this RSP interview today. I'll be on, and Nick
Yes.
too, right? Nick will also be on. So yeah, that's we're all in sync with that, and because that's another thing, he was always present for his patient,
Yeah.
for his friends, and I say that hope doesn't begin with solutions. Hope begins with presence. And that's first and foremost the presence of the Lord with us, God, and then the presence that we are with our fellow man, in our case as physicians with our patients. And that's really where hope begins. And that's when we get the best
Yeah, for
outcomes.
sure. I just, when Mary Beth reached out to me about this, I don't know what she was expecting me to say, but if it was anything but yes, Mary Beth, forget it. That was like, it's like, Nick, gone 10 years. Can we honor him? Absolutely. I try to honor him every day. Like I said, he's here behind my left shoulder every day, as well as I couldn't even grab all the books in time. I've got, more to show when I talk about the entirety of the set. There's one up there, and today I'm putting it in the seats and everywhere. But yeah, he's very much present in our lives, and I'm so grateful for you, Tony. I mean, you have a absolute heart of gold. The true healer's heart, and yet, uh, I bring back this part of it, the R word that some people resist, and the R word isn't resistance, but it's responsibility. It's that you become a coworker in your journey back to health with someone like Dr. Nick and yourself and other of the Gonzalez Guardians. If a doctor says, just come here, give me all your money, I'll do it for you, run if you can run, walk if you can run. If you need a walker, get out of there, because they are not going to help you to heal. They're pretending to do something that no doctor is supposed to do for you, everything for you. It's about engagement, living in principle, finding all of these things that, we know that must be done. And, going back to that cancer patient that he had great success with the Gonzalez protocol, yet straight off of it didn't live as long as some of the others we will feature, not because the protocol didn't work, but because they didn't work the protocol. And it's true whether you do the Gonzalez protocol or another kind of holistic integrative therapy, you've got to take part in it. And another part of that is the L, the vitamin L. I like to call it love. Very often where love isn't, fear is. And where fear is, cancer can grow and manifest and then spread. And so we don't always have to fight and kill cancer. The whole idea of that we must battle it and destroy it. What about loving it? How about that? And that's a spiritual concept that I think the depths of which Dr. Nick really understood as well.
Yeah, a couple points to that. If we think of the word cancer, you could think of it in a Latin form. It's tired of being, cansancio, cancer, tired of being. So I would ask all of you that are watching, what are you tired of in your life? And you're creating an opportunity for disease to happen. And so this is so, so very important. With respect to love, in my first book, I want to say this because it's my grandma. So in my first book, Hope for Cancer, 7 principles to remove fear. The word we've mentioned a few times, RSB, remove fear and empower your healing journey. You just said the same thing in different ways than my subtitle is. But on page 298 of my first book here, I talk about my grandma. My grandmother from maternal, she lived to be 103 years of age and a healthy life. She actually passed away from a doctor's mistake. How often does that happen, right? And so when she was 95, I asked her, Grandma, what are your 3 secrets to longevity? Other than her eyesight not being optimal, she was well. And she said 3 things, son. And now I'm the oldest grandchild. And she said, 1, eat 3 meals a day at the same time every day. And that worked for her. And you talk about that rhythm, right, in life and digestion, that worked for her. Second clue of longevity was be in bed by 9 p.m. She didn't know. She didn't study. She had not even a first grade education, but that's what she did. And now we know that between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is the time where the body regenerates, heals, repairs itself, neuroplasticity happens, all the good stuff, right? Senescent cells are destroyed, autophagy, mitophagy. So between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So she was right on that. And the third one, secret to longevity, RSB, that four-letter word that you just
Mhm.
mentioned, love, right? And yeah, it's
Oh,
beautiful.
I thank you for sharing that. My opening talk at the Red Pill Expo was about overcoming fear, how on one sense I
Mhm.
acknowledge that it can keep me alive a little bit if I'm riding the edge of a cliff on my mountain bike. I'm a little bit scared to fall off, so I'm going to be extra careful. That's, there's a legitimate use for all emotions and states. That's true. But what we have found is that we've degraded into a civilization, if you can call it that, where we are controlled and manipulated by others through fear to behave in certain ways that are against our best interest of living our mission and our purpose and in love. And so I find that the deceptive practices of frightening people in oncology, which is, let's be honest, the standard of care in oncology, not you, of course, or Dr. Nick or others like Gonzalez Guardians, but it's to use fear to the advantage of the doctor to get you on the drug that they profit from. And I'm not being cynical. I'm just that's the business model. And to break free of it,
Yeah.
it wasn't easy for Dr. Nick, but he would not stray from it. And Dr. Tony, what you've done is extraordinary, and the Gonzalez Guardians. And, that's what I'm saying. The legacy of Dr. Nick is this is all part of that.
Yeah, and as a segue to that, in my 30 plus years working in integrative oncology, I've come to realize that unresolved emotional trauma is often the hidden toxin that is driving disease at the cell level. So when we talk about this fear, because as you said, fear is necessary. All these emotions, all these is given by the Lord, by God our creator. We need to have fear in situations like you mentioned, or when that proverbial lion is chasing us, right? To escape and survive. But when it's an unresolved emotional trauma, that I say it's often the
Mhm.
hidden toxin, because we think about toxins as heavy metals and parasites and fluoride and all that, which definitely they are, no question about that. However, let's think about unresolved emotional traumas as a hidden toxin that are driving disease or is driving disease at the cell level. And that's where disease begins and ends, is at the cell level as the basic
Mhm.
unit of life, that cells form tissues, tissues form organs,
Mhm.
organs form
Yeah.
systems like the immune system, respiratory system, and so forth. Then we have this beautiful body that God has created in a
Yeah.
perfect
I can
image.
hear Nick right now talking with us, and we are having the greatest conversation. I'm taking it next level with, cancer stem cells. I'm like, what is the prime, directive of the stem cell? It could be anything. And yet we imbue it with the emotions or the unresolved traumas so that it manifests in a certain way because the energy it encounters when it's here, right? And so these so-called cancer stem cells, I think they're brought to life in terms of the C word because of the things we're discussing. And I know Dr. Nick would be all over this. We'd be having the best conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes, and yeah, once I just saw so many patients today from the UK, from Canada, from all over the US, and that's the first thing, RSB, is to change that thinking that has been, indoctrinated in them by their oncologists, with all due respect, giving them a prognosis. If you don't do this, you're going to die. We have a patient from the UK here with stage 4 stomach cancer with a hemoglobin of 8.4, very anemic. But she looks well, she feels well, she's getting better and better every day. And the first thing I did with her is not talk about the treatment, talk about where she is spiritually and emotionally. Because I said, this vitamin C that's dripping on you, that's good too. But that's not as important as where you are spiritually and emotionally and changing that paradigm. And I have, as you can imagine, so many years, hundreds, if not thousands, of stories and example, but I want to say one that really highlights the point is we had a patient in our Tijuana treatment center. He was from LA, but he was originally from Brazil, a tall guy, like 6'6". And I'm there, and the assigned doctor, the attending doctor says, Dr. Tony, this patient wants to talk to you. And I said, okay, bring his chart so I could see what's going on medically. And he said, no, he doesn't want to talk to you about anything medical. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go into the room, I see the patient, and the first thing he does when he sees me, he starts sobbing. And he says, thank you, Dr. Tony. And I'm like, what happened? He said, well, I thought my Heavenly Father had abandoned me because I've been into pornography and doing this and that and affairs and so many things. And here at this Tijuana treatment center, I heard God speak to me. And he said 4 words, because he had thought that his Heavenly Father had abandoned him, didn't love him, didn't care for him. And what he heard was, son, I love you. And he said, Dr. Tony, now it doesn't matter what happens to the cancer. Thankfully, he was fine. And to this day, he's still alive. But how powerful is that part that conventional medicine never focuses on? And Dr. Nick, this was a big aspect of his treatment plan. We often think about the enzymes, the diet, and the detox. But what about that personal relationship, that love, that fulfilling that spiritual aspect of each and every
I know
one
his
of
book,
us?
What Went Wrong, and I was just thinking about, where medicine went wrong. And I've talked about this for years. It's when they abandoned the spirit, they abandoned God, and everything else, manifests from there. That's your first motivation if you don't have that. And, the 5 words I hear is, I am always with you. I am always with you. That is a comfort when we feel abandoned, but we're never abandoned. We might attempt to abandon God because of whatever choices we make, but we're never abandoned. And that love is unconditional and always there. We might have to, pay for the consequences of actions we take and make, but there's always that love and forgiveness. And, there's a genuine, and I'll call it out to those doctors that are out there that are not here yet. Repent and mean it sincerely of the things many of you didn't know. You were trained allopathically in a godless Flexner Report curriculum, and you just did what you were told. Now, that's not an ultimate excuse. You're not absolved because, tell God, I was just doing what I was told, and it was horrible what you did. The point is, when you recognize it, now you're asked to do better. And, there's no excuse now. Yes. There's enough information. There are enough books about Dr. Nick and by Dr. Nick and by Dr. Tony here and others. There's no excuse not to know this and to do better. And I know that Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez was always inspiring anyone who would listen to him to do better. And it's inspired me in my life. And I know it's inspired you. And, you as one of the Gonzalez guardians, and you have your clinics, Hope for Cancer. I just hope one day, talk about hope, that maybe we could do a special week of celebration down there and we could broadcast live every day from your clinic. I think that would be amazing.
That would be amazing, and having you would be awesome. And you could talk to the patients, you could talk to the companions. We start every morning with praise and worship. They're hopeful, and it's a true hope. Sometimes they said, oh, Dr. Tony, that's a false hope. There's no such as false hope. God gives us hope. The only one that can take hope away from us is ourselves. But when you say repent, RSB, that reminded me that we need to seek, then we need to draw closer to God, and then repent, and great things happen. And oftentimes patients ask me, what about intermittent fasting and all that? This is where we can utilize carefully under doctor supervision, of course, especially in later stages of cancer. We have to be a bit careful with fasting, but when we fast, we are in a better state of mind and spirit to seek the Lord, to draw him closer, and then to repent, and then all things are
beautiful.
possible.
Absolutely. Well, the spirit of Nick Gonzalez is alive and well. Thanks to you, Tony, as well. Thanks to everyone out there that knows and loves him and has enjoyed this show, particularly when Dr. Nick would appear all those years. And Mary Beth, we love you, and I can't wait to have you on the show, and everybody else that we're lining up to feature, 10 years after Dr. Nick's untimely passing from our perspective. I know God has a plan, but we still miss him, but he's still ever present. And Dr. Tony, anytime anything's breaking news on any front, you always have an open door here on the Robert Scott Bell Show as well.
Thank you. Maybe next time we could talk about our nanogenics technology, where it's pretty impressive. We just saw a tumor decrease by 69% in the first month. A tumor that was being very resistant, all types of therapies that the patient did. So yeah, stay tuned. We have
so
a lot
that's
to
not like
chat
sharks
about.
with laser beams, because you got those out back, right?
Right, we have that also. Yes, yes. This is we call it targeted nanoparticle
Well, I'd love to
technology.
talk about that
And
next visit for sure. But
yeah.
once again, thank you for
Yes.
taking the time in between patients there at the Hope for Cancer Clinic. Dr. Antonio Jimenez, my good friend, and good friend to Dr. Nick Gonzalez, one of the Gonzalez Guardians.